Cyber attacks against everything from our infrastructure to our public schools is increasing in the wake of the pandemic. Small business owners are at particular risk. After all, many are operating on tight budgets before the pandemic started. Now they have to deal with managing their workforce that's accessing their network remotely. From phishing to malware, there's a lot of reasons to be concerned. The good news, there's easy steps small business owners can take to protect their network. I'm Donna Fuscaldo, a senior finance writer with business.com. Today, we're speaking to Kurt Baumgartner, a principal research analyst at cybersecurity firm Kaspersky, about how small business owners can stay safe amid all the heightened risks. Thanks, Kurt, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So as you know, small business owners are a target for cyber hackers and other nefarious criminals. Why is that? Are they just the low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, over the past 10 years, we've seen targeted attacks of all kinds, but especially a rise in targeted attacks by ransomware gangs on small businesses. And there are probably a few reasons for it. One certainly is organizations in all likelihood have a real lack of robust security measures. So instead of meeting those measures and those challenges head on, they may have an easier way to get in with small and medium businesses. Also, another reason might be that often the ransomware, the ransom sum is a bit lower than what you might see with enterprise organizations. So the group can fly below the radar and not attract the attention of the FBI or other law enforcement organizations. And then another reason might have to do with simply the work. It might take weeks of work to steal all the records, all the communications from an enterprise organization and lock up all their computers versus a real quick turnaround with a smaller organization. And so effectively the ransomware gang might have a higher return on investment by going at these small and medium-sized businesses.
Is it only ransomware that small business owners should be worried about? What are like the major threats that they should be worried about?
Well, certainly, there's always been financial cybercrime to be concerned about. So Emotet, which finally was shut down, that group had gotten their start pursuing financial records and communications. So they would perform all sorts of financial fraud in the background. But then that turned more and more into, it seemed like it was more profitable for the group to actually take part in providing access to these networks to ransomware gangs. So not only were they in all likelihood a part of a ransomware group, but they also bought and sold access to small and medium business networks. So yes, there's still plenty of financial crime to be concerned about. And, BEC schemes and these ridiculous schemes, but ransomware is at the top of the list right now. One thing that happened to me this past week was I got a call from an individual saying he was from Microsoft support. And, we talked for a while. I was waiting for him to ask me to either open up a RDP or a remote session or to install something on my computer, but he never got around to it and I just had to go. So in addition to simply spear phishing, sending emails, these organizations are, they're actually calling people on the phone and they'll ask you to open up a remote session. They'll pretend to be from a support center from a large organization that in all likelihood you do have some business contact with. And then from there, they'll do any one of a number of things. And that includes financial cybercrime and also ransomware.
Did the risk get worse or heightened because of the pandemic with so many people working remotely and small businesses having to protect these networks?
It certainly did change things for small and medium businesses because a lot of these organizations have work from home employees. So they set up VPN appliances, they set up RDP servers. Sometimes they didn't set up the RDP servers appropriately or correctly. They didn't configure these things. So brute forcing attacks went through the roof during the pandemic. These ransomware gangs and the access brokers that are always looking for ways to gather credentials and ways into networks so that they can sell these credentials to ransomware gangs. They were all heavily using RDP brute forcing techniques. So things, new technologies started becoming relied on as work from home increased. And, we see probably, I think it's 3,000 organizations that have been affected by double extortion schemes. And those are the only ones that we know about. Those are the ones that didn't pay right away. So that's kind of tip of the iceberg kind of stuff. We know that there are anywhere from 40 to 50 or 60 groups that are pushing individual pieces of ransomware. And there may be affiliates connected with those 60 groups. So there are a lot of efforts against these SMBs that these guys are all up to. And they're dealing with new technology that they're setting up and managing to deal with the pandemic and work from home. So it's a lot to juggle and a lot to deal with all at once. Yeah, the pandemic definitely changed things.
How serious should small business owners take these threats? I know there's statistics that a lot of them don't ever recover and end up ultimately shutting down. Are those real risks out there for small business owners?
For sure, it's not like you can just take it back, once things get encrypted. So we know that, even school districts, we did a survey, and 55% of parents said that their child's school had experienced some sort of cyber attack while they were at that particular school. So we know that even schools are getting hit a lot. We know that small businesses are getting nailed. I mean, over 3,000 organizations is really tip of the iceberg kind of stuff, and that is concerning. So yes, these are big issues, and when they do pay, and we always recommend that they don't pay because you're just creating a bigger problem. But if they do pay, and unfortunately there are perverse incentives for paying those ransoms, sometimes it can be considered a business cost, so it might be tax deductible, that kind of thing. But you might get a decryption tool provided, and this has happened, where the ransomware gang takes your $50,000 or $1,000 or $100,000, gives you a tool that just messes up your data, and you can't recover a thing. And this happens again and again. They don't always necessarily provide you with keys. One group recently, DarkSide, they just went completely, Revel went completely dark, and they left a lot of people in the lurch. So yes, you can pay up, and it doesn't guarantee a thing about whether or not your network is coming back online. So the answer there, sort of just to take things a step further, the answer there is to be prepared for when it happens.
Excellent. Since you said some of these victims, it happens twice to them, what are your tips, or what are the best ways small business owners can protect themselves? Even easy tips, because to some it might be like, I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't even know what all of this is.
I mentioned brute forcing before, is a very common way is a very common technique that these gangs and access brokers use to get in. So making sure that your remote access servers are hidden behind a VPN appliance, that they aren't accessible to the web, that you're using two-factor authentication for accounts. So even if you do lose, a username and password, a USB stick or a text message is required in order to log in. I don't usually recommend text messages, but USB sticks are usually the recommended multi-factor authentication tool. But other things can have to do with simply basic security hygiene for the organization. So taking employees through some sort of online training, there's a lot of free stuff out there about understanding what sorts of links they may be suspicious of when they receive an email, what sorts of emails to look out for when they're, when they're just looking through their emails, those sorts of things. having passwords that can't be easily cracked. So let's say somebody makes the mistake of leaving an RDP server exposed. Having a sufficiently complex and long password certainly can go a long ways in preventing RDP brute forcing. So those things can really help. And then, of course, endpoint security is always a full suite will definitely cause problems for even the more advanced attackers.
And then finally, what is keeping you up at night? Where do you see the biggest threats looming for small business owners? Is it more ransomware or something else?
When I talk with my friends about who are small business owners, they're running printing shops, they're running real estate organizations of their own. Yeah, I'd say right now their bigger issues have to do with ransomware. Some of them have been DDoSed before, but really front and center ransomware and a shutdown of their business operations are what would cost them the most, and it would be really damaging to their businesses. So yeah, keeping on top of the ransomware tactics and how to prevent them, it should be front and center.
Well, this was really helpful. You've just helped millions of small business owners stay more safe. So I want to thank you so much for taking out the time today.
Thank you very much, Donna. It was good talking with you.